Welcome back to the Zach Djellab Show, ladies and gentlemen. The show, apparently, not the channel. Of course, joining me today is a two-man show. Dougie Critchley. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, Ollie Thomas was supposed to be here, I believe, but he was still hungover.
Yes.
Not really, but congrats to Palace.
Exactly, yeah. The party was carrying on for... I was going to say Fulham, Crystal Palace, obviously, winning the FA Cup. Huge result. We were going to talk a little bit about that, but unfortunately, yeah, Ollie isn't here today. He'll be here next week, I assume. But of course, we did see last night the action. Ben, who's also sometimes here on the show, of course, isn't today. He's currently on his way back from Bilbao after partying the night away and seeing his beloved Spurs lift the Europa League. I'm sure we can kind of talk a little bit about them as well during the video. As you can see by the title of the video, we're going to talk about transfers and possibly the worst moves that your club could make at home. And we'll also talk a little bit about the Europa League when we get on to Manchester United and Spurs and their transfers. But to kick things off, I wanted to talk about Liverpool, Dougie. One of the ones, the big moves that we've seen happen over the last week, confirmed already. Classic kind of feel like how this summer transfer window could go. A lot of moves happening early. Liverpool, Jeremy Frimpong, looks like it's done for a very reasonable fee here. One of the reasons I think this has kind of been brought into this kind of video to talk about, very different kind of fullback, right? Okay, Trent Alexander-Arnold is someone who is obviously a very attacking-minded player, always been fantastic on the ball. Frimpong is even more so. He is somebody who played on the right in a right wing back system of a back three at times. Really operated more as a winger than a right back or defensive right back, that's for sure. How do we feel like this is going to work for this Liverpool squad? Obviously, I think if you take the player alone, anybody signing him, you're getting a good player here who has high potential, still super young, can impact the game very easily. But coming to this Liverpool side, who obviously they have Conor Bradley. Do you think this is someone actually more looking towards being a right winger than a right back? How do you think it works out?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I thought Jeremy Frimpong would be perfect for a club like Inter Milan or even Man United, obviously if Man United were in a better position because of the system that they play. As you say, under Xabi Alonso, he's been playing exclusively as a right wing-back, was a massive part of their phenomenal 23-24 campaign. They lost 1 of 53 games, unbeaten in the Bundesliga, unbeaten obviously in the German Cup as well. I think it was 12 goals and 14 assists for Jeremy Frimpong. Absolutely remarkable. And him and Alex Grimaldo on the left wing-back slot were key to their entire system. But I think it's interesting in that Trent Alexander-Arnold obviously leaving Liverpool, and some people were questioning or maybe asking, will they bring in more of a backup to Conor Bradley? Jeremy Frimpong, I don't think you bring in Jeremy Frimpong at his age with his credentials unless he's going to start. He's obviously not going to replace Mo Salah on the right wing. So I assume the plan for him is to start at right back. And what was interesting is that Arne Slot's system this year was more refrained than Jurgen Klopp in terms of Trent Alexander-Arnold's role. He played deeper, he played more controlled. It was a much more defensive role, exactly. And that reflected his numbers in terms of his assists and goals. So Jeremy Frimpong feels like a huge departure from that. But then if you look at the actual transfer, I think it's £29.5 million, release clause at his age. It's such an amazing deal financially that maybe you just bring him in and see how it works.
Yeah.
And then what impacts it more, I think, is who you bring in at left back, because Andy Robertson looks like he's probably going to become a number 2 next year. Tsimikas might well leave. And this week, there's still reports that it's Milos Kerkez as their top target. Richard Hughes obviously brought him to Bournemouth. He's now at Liverpool. And Milos Kerkez and Jeremy Frimpong at left back and right back as a traditional duo, that is so attacking and so open. And I think Milos Kerkez can adapt his game to become more defensive. But I'm surprised they're not more going for like a left-sided centre-back / left-back, like a Joel Hatto from Ajax, who has been linked there as well. Maybe by the time this video goes live, that would have changed. So Jeremy Frimpong, his defensive numbers are worse than Trent's. He's not played in that role since his days at Celtic. For me, it feels like a bit of a risk to play in a traditional right-back role.
Yes, I would tend to agree. But that's why I wonder what they're going to end up doing. Like, I agree, Kerkez. I think actually Kerkez this year has got better defensively than we'd seen him before. I think you've seen him improve massively on that side of his game, along with his continued very impressive numbers going forward as well. What I also thought with Frimpong is maybe they do just kind of use him more as a right winger. Like in certain games where they are maybe playing lesser opposition, where they're expected to have higher possession, they have a Frimpong there whose job is just to go down that right flank. And look, Salah isn't like an overlapping winger, is he? He's always coming inside. That's his role. So I wonder if that's the kind of thought process to be like, look, Salah is almost going to... And I think this comes down to what striker they bring in as well. Another person they're linked to is Christopher Nkunku. Again, whether this one's a full... if you believe reports, who knows? But his name and Liverpool has happened over previous years as well. When he was at Leipzig, he was linked there too. It's definitely someone they've kept an eye on. And he isn't a traditional number 9. I've mentioned in a few different videos about how I think it's going to be really interesting to see what forward Liverpool bring in, because I don't know whether it's just through years of being used to it being Bobby Firmino and Diego Jota and I guess to a degree Nunez. It doesn't feel like their number 9 or their striker is going to be a classic number 9 like a Gyökeres or an Osimhen. It doesn't feel like that's the Liverpool way or how Slot's going to do it. And obviously this season we've not really seen Slot operate with a traditional number 9 either, because they haven't really had that option there. And if anything, the whole way of playing football at Liverpool is about giving these opportunities to Mohamed Salah, who basically kind of comes into this this attacking striker role, advanced forward role anyway. So I wonder if they're kind of thinking, look, Frimpong can just be this winger for us who comes overlapping and we'll kind of work it that way. And maybe it wouldn't shock me if you kind of see not Salah in the number 9 position,
but moving further inside.
Yeah, with a Frimpong on the right wing.
I think that could definitely be a factor. I also wonder whether if they do sign Kerkez and Frimpong, whether they're going to change the composition of their midfield, and maybe Szoboszlai becomes a rotation option. McAllister moves further forward, and they sign more of a destroyer sort of 6 style, or someone with much bigger defensive output than McAllister, like someone like an Edison, or I know they've been linked to Adam Wharton. I think that's going to be very, very expensive this summer, but someone like an Edison who can do ball carrying, who can do box to box, but also has big defensive numbers when he needs to. And then you play him alongside Gravenberch, McAllister in front, and that feels a little bit more secure, because you're asking a lot of Konate and Van Dijk to cover huge swathes. Van Dijk, will be 35 by the end of his current contract. Like that's asking a lot if it's Kerkez and Frimpong either side.
Is there anything to say? Right, obviously Liverpool love their wingers cutting in. Is there anything to say that he plays left wing? I know we've never seen him do it. I know, and obviously he's always been this kind of right wing back on the right side. But is there a possibility that obviously he's a right-footed player, that they operate him out on that left wing? And there's been rumours, like obviously there's rumours that Diaz might end up leaving Liverpool. I don't think Liverpool fans are quite happy with who operates in that left wing place, whether that's Gakpo or whether that's Diaz. Is there an argument to say actually they could try maybe him on the left wing?
I'd be surprised, just because I feel like he's at his most dangerous, like in wide open spaces on the right wing. Like he's not a particularly cute player, if that makes sense. Like he's very good at getting to the byline and whipping in crosses, just burning people on the outside, shooting. He's a very good finisher actually for a player that's a right wing back. But getting on the outside in the box, whipping it into the far corner. I can't really imagine him having the sort of delicateness of play to be able to play on the left wing, cut inside, and then play through balls to whoever's going to play up front, or Salah cutting in. So personally, I can't really imagine that. But I do see what you mean. I think Gakpo feels like he took a stride forward this year under Slot. Slot seems to have managed to get them more out of him than Jurgen Klopp did, and obviously he joined mid-season as well. So there's the difficulty around initially adapting to a club when you join in January. But I think most Liverpool fans would be fairly happy with where Gakpo was. And if they do keep Diaz as well, I think that's pretty strong options on the left flank.
Okay, well, it does seem like Frimpong will be on his way to Liverpool, and we'll see what happens with him answered pretty soon. You mentioned Kerkez there as well. He, as you said, is off to Liverpool too. That does cause a lot of questions, doesn't it, about how they're going to do this thing. Maybe this is where we'll see Liverpool kind of bring in this DM, as we mentioned there, to really try and secure the midfield whilst the wing backs or the wingers really go forward, or fullbacks really go forward and overlap. That's going to be super, super interesting with Milos Kerkez. Feels like first half of the year was flying, absolutely flying, and then maybe not. I mean, Bournemouth generally have tailed off a slight tad towards the end of the season. And so maybe his name's just been said a little bit less because of their results going against them. Obviously, they got lost to City quite badly, actually, at the Etihad during midweek. But Kerkez, do you think that's just a fantastic move overall, taking away the whole maybe like questions around the system? it's just what they should be doing.
Yeah, I think Bournemouth have had a recent dip primarily because they actually lost so many players in the middle part of the season. And actually their form was really good, but they were using about 12 players because they had about 11 players out. And that was in the period where they thrashed Newcastle at St James's Park, which as a result just looks better and better as time has gone on. Since I feel like their core players that were fit during that time are just very, very tired. And Iraola's system is pretty exhausting. It kind of became clear that they weren't going to be able to qualify for Europe a little while ago. The Premier League season, as we all know, for the last few weeks has been kind of a little bit dead for a lot of teams, and Bournemouth kind of fit into that category. But he's had some phenomenal games this year. I particularly remember the one, I think it was in October, November time, he played against City, and it was like the final days of Kyle Walker at Man City. And Kyle Walker was trying to give him 5 yards and backing his own pace, and Kirkus was just burning him every time. I think he ended up with 2 assists in that game. And look, if Anthony Robinson was a few years younger, I'd have probably gone for Anthony Robinson over Kirkes just because I feel like he's got a more complete game and is a little bit tidier in the final third. But I feel like Kirkes, given he's relatively new to the Premier League, the leaps and strides he's taken since coming and looking like already one of the best left-backs in the league, it feels like a pretty solid bet for the next few years as well. And Andy Robertson, you know, his attacking output has just completely shrunk this year in a more withdrawn role. He's become a little bit erratic on the ball, some of his decision-making in his own third as well. It's really, really sad because he's been an amazing servant to Liverpool, and it shouldn't be forgotten just how good he was for a number of years. You know, outstanding left-back in the world for probably between 2017 and 2020, probably. But now, 5 years on, it does feel like the end is nigh for him.
He's definitely... I think the first half of the season with Robertson, it was really bad. And then I think it's either Liverpool kind of figured out a way or he managed to kind of stabilise a little bit. And post-January, I think he managed to kind of get into some form. Whether that form was of previous life for him, definitely not. But also Tsimikas played a bit as well. He managed to have a bit of an impact. It all helped out on that side. One of the ones I did want to mention, was the Nkunku one. This, again, we're talking about kind of worst moves you could make. Christopher Nkunku is a funny one because we've not really seen him in the Premier League, if we're being honest now. He's been in the Premier League now for 2 seasons. Last year, he was injured for the majority of it. This season, he isn't kind of fitting the system. I guess that would happen at Chelsea. Would he fit the system at Liverpool? Because if you think about how it's happened at Chelsea, really that 10 position is where he wants to be operating, just behind the striker. At Liverpool, they don't really have that unless they are going to properly try and adapt him into a false 9. How do you feel that move, if it does happen, very much kind of strenuous rumours?
It's a confusing one. Yeah, it's a confusing one. I feel like, you know, his stock right now is really, really low. His value right now is really, really low. So there's an element of bargain, but that's a bargain on what we saw at RB Leipzig. It's definitely not a bargain on what we've seen so far at Chelsea. And I do feel sorry for him because he looked really, really bright in pre-season last year under Pochettino, then gets injured.
Cole Palmer then joins.
Yeah, and he misses basically the entirety of last season. He comes back and Enzo Maresca's in charge, a real possession-heavy, slow build-up kind of guy, which is completely different from the system that he thrived in RB Leipzig, which was really vertical, really quick transitions. And he could play on the left, he could play centrally, and he looked electric. And there's no getting around it. He was one of the Bundesliga's best players. When Chelsea signed him, I was really, really excited. But it hasn't worked out, and Nicholas Jackson is clearly ahead of him. And even when Nicholas Jackson has had really poor patches in front of goal, which he does have as a developing striker, Nkunku still hasn't been trusted really consistently as a number 9.
But when he has played, it's not been. We haven't really seen much from him, have we?
It's been a little bit untidy, hasn't it? Like he feels like a bit of a liability. His runs aren't particularly dynamic. It feels like his teammates don't really trust him as well. His confidence just feels really, really low. So from a Liverpool perspective, it kind of does really surprise me. I feel like if money was no object, the dream target would be someone like Julian Alvarez. But you know, what an impact he's had at Atletico Madrid after a slow start. There's not a chance they let him leave after, I think it's 27 goals, and he cost £80 million last summer. We were talking a bit about it on the lowdown in the last week. Mikey's really pushing Benjamin Šeško to Liverpool. And again, like Gyökeres, Osimhen, they're all in the hat for all these clubs. And maybe Liverpool will do something more interesting. I think Mikey's argument for Šeško was that there's almost less pressure on him going to Liverpool than Arsenal, because Arsenal have far fewer options in forward areas. And if you are that number 9 that arrives this summer, given his age, and given the fact that his finishing is still fairly erratic at points, despite the quality he shows in moments, there's so much pressure on Arsenal's number 9 signing this year. Whereas joining Liverpool, there are other players that can pick up the mantle, not least Mo Salah, who is the outstanding attacking player in the entire league. So Nkunku to Liverpool does kind of baffle me, to be honest.
I would agree. I mean, unless there's something... I mean, Liverpool have become a little bit more transitional this season. Like that's without a doubt. I think that's been to their benefit as well. They've scored lots of goals on that side. I think that's somewhere where maybe they could look at Nkunku to help out in that front. But like, if you think of the RB Leipzig of Nkunku, a lot of that was kind of linked at times with Poulsen, who did a lot more of that kind of number 9 work for RB Leipzig, and then he was able to kind of get onto the end of things or get played through on goal. I think I always remember thinking, like, if you thought back to his goals at Leipzig, a lot of them were basically transitional. It wasn't these deep blocks when they were playing against, which a lot of these top sides do play against in the Premier League. However, Liverpool just won the Premier League. They do have a lot of money to spend.
Absolutely.
I think they've shown their hand a couple of times over the last previous seasons by putting in a bid for over 100 million for Caicedo and obviously not having that come in. And now they've just won the Prem, even more money to possibly spend in the Champions League, of course, next season. And so, look, if they could force some sort of deal where they go, look, getting him for, I don't think Chelsea would let him go for this cheap, but for say 20 million, like maybe that's something that kind of goes around their mind and thinks, oh, maybe try him along with getting other options as well. So maybe there's something there, but I'd be surprised as well, to be honest, if they did go for that move. Let's head over then to Manchester United. Talk first, I think. Day. Need to talk about the Europa League that happened last night. When this goes out, it'll be on Friday, so 2 nights before. Tottenham Hotspur victorious in maybe what was one of the worst European finals I've ever had the displeasure of watching. It was rough. I think that's fair to say. I think the fact that it was a scrappy own goal that kind of went down as Brennan Johnson's goal.
Still a bit confused about that, by the way. I'm not even sure Johnson gets a touch.
I thought it was an own goal. But yeah, the fact I think that kind of that goal showed how that game for 90 minutes went. But more specifically about Manchester United, some very interesting comments over the last 24 hours about Ruben Amorim saying, like, obviously, I now understand it more than ever what I've got to do, but if the ball won't be gone, I'll leave tomorrow with no compensation. Bruno Fernandes saying, I want to stay until the ball want me to be gone. If they need cash, I completely understand it. Lots of people actually turning on Bruno Fernandes after his final performance, which wasn't great at all, but has probably been United's best player so far this season.
The last few months, come on.
So that means next season, no Champions League football, no European football whatsoever. Finances aren't being helped out because of that. They've only got the Premier League and obviously the domestic competitions to play in, finishing in what will be their worst ever Premier League season. However, if you look at the rumour mill, suppose they're still able to buy any single player they want out there. Matheus Cunha supposedly still very keen to join Man United. They are supposedly also looking at Martinez from Villa, who might be leaving Aston Villa this summer as well. I mean, I kind of doubt that now, especially they don't have Champions League football. What do we make of the Man United situation?
I think it was just so clear that in the second half, Spurs just went, you can have the ball. Yeah. You can have the ball, try and create anything against us. And look, Vicario makes a good save from Luke Shaw's header. There's a chance for Bruno Fernandes with a header that goes wide. And Van der Ven makes that amazing clearance from Højlund's effort. But aside from that, United were just so toothless, which is what's been the problem all season. And the fact that United fans have been arguing, we're just focusing on the Europa League. We're just focusing on the Europa League. The league doesn't matter whatsoever. Despite the money that you gain from every place in the Premier League, when you're stuffed for cash, like, it does make a difference. To lose, or to gain 24 points, I think it is, in 26 games under Amorim, to take 2 points from their last 8 as we record this in the league, it's really, really dreadful. And there's a variety of different positions that need to be strengthened, obviously, without Champions League cash and with a lack of clarity over whether a certain amount of players even fit this system. The lack of faith in someone like Kobbie Mainoo throughout this season as well, who was starting for England in the Euros last year. The fact that Garnacho, he waited so long to pull him on last night. There's question marks already from United fans about Patrick Dorgu, which I feel, again, feels pretty harsh given the fact he was a 20-year-old arriving from Lecce. What were people expecting? And the fact they probably need a right wing-back, a central midfielder, arguably a goalkeeper, an inside forward, maybe a centre-back, and clearly a striker, because Rasmus Højlund's confidence is just absolutely shot right now. He needs to become second or third choice and rebuild his confidence. Like, the lack of movement when the ball was wide last night, his struggles to bring the ball under control, it was really, really bleak to watch. And you saw Xerxes come on, who's half fit for 20, 30 minutes. and just make a world of difference, make a big difference to how connected United's attack was. It was chalk and cheese with Rasmus Højlund. In terms of Matheus Cunha, without Champions League money, and I don't know what their budget is, and without knowing how much money they bring in for Rashford, Antony, Sancho, who you all expect to leave this summer, £62.5 million now looks like quite a lot of money for Matheus Cunha. And I don't think he's a bad player whatsoever. I think he makes a big difference to United's attack. I think he fits the system very well. He clearly is a player that makes things happen, which is what United so sorely lack. But given their budget constraints now, is £62.5 million suddenly too much? It's just suddenly not sure, because as I say, they need 4 different positions, and we don't know what money they're going to bring in from selling players. So there's suddenly so many question marks. In terms of Amorim, I don't think you can make such a big philosophical change in November, going from Ten Hag to Amorim, and not give him a summer to bring in players that fit his system. It just doesn't make any sense. It was a strange appointment to begin with, not because of his quality, but because of going from Ten Hag to Amorim. And it's been worse than anyone ever could have predicted. But you've got to give him a window, surely, because what is the point in starting all over again?
I think their biggest issue is previously was the commitment from Amorim, as in that was supposedly one of the things.
His negativity in press conferences?
Yeah, like the board were quite questioning, does he even want to be here with how he's speaking? And look,
he's
I think
very
you can
honest.
sometimes, you can. And I mentioned before, like sometimes the honesty is maybe what is kind of making things a little bit tougher for him at times. Like to a point, there's only so many times you can say we're really bad before someone goes, yeah, but you're the guy that's meant to fix this.
Try and do something, yeah.
You're the guy that's meant to. That's one of the things that I saw United fans were really annoyed about yesterday. Is everything was kind of said about how, okay, look, the league form's bad, but we are putting all our eggs in the basket of trying to be good for this final and get us back in the Champions League. And even if you think about the comments that he was making, like, it wasn't really about winning a trophy. It was about getting back in the Champions League. That was the big thing. Whereas compared to Ange, and it was all about like the trophy. That was the thing they built around. Whereas Amorim was more about just like, oh yeah, it's the result of it that matters, less than the actual moment of it. Which I think is probably not the right output to have had. And then to have built it all up to this final, where, to be honest, I thought in that Chelsea game, at least the first half, they were actually not too bad. Rasmus Højlund again, and that was poor, and obviously led to him being poor in this game as well. But to have built it up so hugely, to then have that as the performance that you willing, and then come out as well after the game and say about how, like, I actually thought we were okay for the first 5 or 7 minutes. 5 or 7 minutes of a 90-minute game.
Yeah.
Is this really this isn't what you should be saying at all right now? So yes, I would tend to agree with what you said there about kind of their Europa League stuff. In terms of Cunha, I completely agree as well. It's a great signing, but it's a lot of money. It's something we said originally about Cunha before it was United going to him, or whatever team was going to go after him. £62.5 million is a lot of money for any club. It is. And okay, there are several clubs that could do that and others. However, this would make you one of the most expensive players probably that will be bought in the Premier League this season. It will make you someone that all the eyes are upon. It's someone who himself isn't always available for games due to certain attitude issues. And so this connection of how it's going to work at United next season is going to be very, very interesting. Even Garnacho after the final coming out and saying how he was annoyed about how he played in every game leading up to the final, comes to the final and he got 20 minutes and it was rubbish. And then Amorim in the post-match being asked about it, him saying, well, Garnacho missed that big chance in the semi-final. I mean, they absolutely smashed Bilbao. It didn't really matter in that front.
His subs were late. They did feel really late because Mason Mount was quite off it. And that whole left flank was, before Garnacho came on, was really, really ineffective. It was kind of like give the ball to Ahmad and kind of hope. It was almost like they were acting like
Ahmad's the only hope there.
Yeah.
Genuinely.
It was almost like a sort of Lamine Yamal effect on that team in terms of all the ball was just going to Ahmad. And he did the best he could. And I actually thought some of his delivery was okay. But it was a big ask. And when Bruno was so off it, I mean, he gave the ball away 27 times. But that is kind of Bruno Fernandes. It was a really difficult display. The signing that I'm more confused about or less sure about is actually Liam Djellab. I feel like trying to solve United's striking issues with a player with 1 year of Premier League experience who has been good in moments for Ipswich. Again, I think it's a big ask. And look, he's got a lot of personality. He battles for every ball. He's played very well against top teams, I think. You guys in particular. He's had good games against Chelsea. I just have my doubts that you fix a Xerxes Højlund-shaped hole with Liam Djellab. I feel like you need more experience in there and a better goal scorer or more regular goal scorer. The issue is those goal scorers don't come cheap. And like signing experience when you're also signing Cunha, without Champions League money is really, really difficult. I mean, the player that I think they could go for is someone like Patrick Schick, who's only got 2 years left on his deal at Bayer Leverkusen, £29 years old, I should say, and has scored 27 goals this year, mainly off the bench, and wouldn't mind being a rotation option as well. I wonder whether Bayer Leverkusen would let him go, given they're losing Xabi Alonso, potentially Wirtz, Frimpong, Tar. Like, that's a lot of change there. But Schick, I think, is the best option.
Well, I think it's funny now to look back a couple of months ago when Joe Tomlinson suggested Mateta as the possible signing.
And
now they would have bitten their hand off
Absolutely.
for him, to be quite honest, of how it worked. And obviously they're playing European football next season. Man United are not, so I don't know whether Mateta would be willing to leave. I don't mind the Liam Delap one as much, mainly because if their finances are going to be in a hole, he's only going to cost, what was it? Is it 30 million or
30,
20?
something like that, yeah.
Yeah, 30 million for his release clause after Ipswich got relegated. And as you've already mentioned, like any other striker's probably going to be costing you 50 upwards.
At minimum,
even
yeah.
Patrick Schick's 40 plus, really.
You'd have thought, maybe.
To get his services. And so maybe it's somewhere where I can understand why. And also, you can sell it to him more as a project. Like, Liam Delap doesn't need to be playing Champions League football next season.
No.
You can sell it to him as like, look, we just want to be focusing on this domestic campaign. We want to build this like core of the squad. You're going to be a part of that. I do worry slightly for the same reasons when Rasmus Højlund joined. Like, Delap is a little bit older, to be fair, but having this young guy who is still developing, still learning his trade, then lead the line for Manchester United is such a big amount of pressure to put on someone to deal with that. I personally do think Delap would actually be able to deal with that a lot better than Højlund can. We've seen his game already in the Premier League. When Højlund was joined, we mentioned it before, but when Højlund joined, he was still so raw at Atalanta and barely played at Atalanta. To then come to United and have to do it was a big ask. Whereas at least Delap, you've got a history of this season to have seen him. Okay, he can deal with Premier League defences. He can deal with that. He himself is like a strong guy who doesn't have a really poor touch, is able to make really good decisions, I think, when in front of goal. I think this is something which we can see with the Delap compared to... Because the other option, really, I think all the other options are really tough to bring in. I think everyone else will have a different suitor for them before Delap.
This is someone like Jonathan David on a free, but then you imagine as a free transfer, he's probably going to have... he's probably going to have better options.
There's so many different people available.
I think Delap scored 12 league goals this year for a really poor Ipswich side, but it's not the numbers and his passing. I don't know. I have my big doubts about Liam Delap at Man United, to be totally honest.
Do you have your big doubts about Liam Delap generally? Like, if he went
for
to
a top
any
club right now,
yeah.
If he went to Chelsea, I kind of get it because he can play back up to Nicholas Jackson. But if he's seen as, the saviour of Man United is a big ask when they've just finished 16th and lost a Europa League final. I don't think any player that comes in this year should be viewed as the saviour. There's clearly so many more factors at play. I don't think he's as refined as he could be at his age, and the numbers are impressive, but they're not. That is the man.
And he didn't tear it up in the Championship either.
No.
Like, he didn't have stellar campaigns in the Championship. So I do understand your... And this is part of what my worry was when he first came to the Premier League, and he very much outperformed what I was thinking. Slightly off topic, but what should be expectation next season then for United? Like, I guess we've got to see their transfer window. We've got to see who they bring in and who they sell. I think is another big thing. But roughly, right now, if I had to ask you...
I think it's a 3-4 year thing, isn't it? Definitely. I mean, they were planning to win the Premier League by 2028. That feels very, very unlikely. I think I'd try and aim for a top 10 finish. I think, honestly, look at the progress that the chasing pack have made in recent years, whether that's Newcastle, whether that's Aston Villa, even Bournemouth, Brentford, Brighton. It's very, very difficult to imagine Man United finishing ahead of these sides. Even Crystal Palace as well. Great run since the end of October. Have an FA Cup to build on, European football to attract players with. I don't know how many peak age players go to Man United this summer. I get the attraction of playing for Man United, but this is not the time to join Man United. Clearly, you wait 2-3 more years. If Liverpool are in for you, if Man City, if Arsenal, if even Chelsea are in for you, it's a way more attractive project than Man United right now. And I think, they clearly need 3 or 4 starting players to come in and make a massive difference immediately to a squad devoid of confidence that have just lost a European final to a side that never wins trophies. It's a very difficult sell.
I completely agree. Completely agree. It's going to be very, very interesting. I don't think it's really worth wasting our time talking about him going to Man United, but he is also linked to Barcelona. Emiliano Martinez at Aston Villa.
Best goalkeeper in the world, apparently.
The best goalkeeper in the world. Obviously, there are talks about whether, I know they want to kind of extend Szczesny at Barca. I don't know whether that's going to 100% happen. Szczesny's in like a weird mindset all the time. I feel like when I see him speaking, there's that great thing about how he doesn't want to smoke, but he has to smoke, and he doesn't want people to copy, whatever it might be.
He might just want to take his ciggies to the beach.
Exactly, yeah, whatever it might be. However, Martinez, it's weird because it seems almost like it is going to happen. There's been a few people, like it seems that Villa are looking at possible goalkeepers for replacements, which is the right thing to do, obviously. He has been a good signing for Villa. He's been great for Villa, done fantastic things for them ever since he's joined that club. But is Barcelona somewhere where he think he should be going?
Well, they are going to look to the future this summer. I feel like Ter Stegen's had a quite dramatic drop-off in form.
He's not super young. He's not a young goalkeeper.
Yeah, but exactly. And he's had massive injuries this year. Szczesny's done a pretty good job, but again, he's not the future of Barcelona's goalkeeping position. They were linked with Joan Garcia, but I can't imagine an Espanyol player going to Barcelona, especially when Villa are looking at him. Apparently Newcastle are looking at him. He was linked to Arsenal in January and last summer as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if he joined a Premier League club. Emi Martinez to Barcelona, he's certainly got the personality for that club. I don't think he's necessarily the best sort of with the ball at his feet compared to some goalkeepers. I think that's probably the biggest weakness in his game. What he is very good at is the sort of personality he brings to the game. His shot stopping is generally pretty solid as well. He does occasionally make quite a few blunders, and which is why it's frustrated me that he's been viewed as the best goalkeeper in the world because he's won so many trophies with Argentina, and Villa fans have defended him so fiercely. There's no more overrated player in the Premier League than Emi Martinez on the basis of that, at least. Look, he's a top 5 or 6 goalkeeper in the Premier League, but I don't think it's any more than that. In terms of Man United, given where Andre Onana's been at this year with his confidence, like they take a player like Emi Martinez sure. Even the bravado that he brings to the role, I think would help Man United.
I just can't see it happening.
Can't see it happening either.
I think you'd see a Saudi move for him before a United move.
Absolutely. And, he's kind of he's maximised his abilities and achievements almost in Europe. And that is a player that you can kind of see going to Saudi Arabia. And look, the things he's achieved with Villa, the things he's achieved with Argentina, from Arsenal's number 2 a few years ago, barely getting a game anywhere except for on loan. Yeah. Fair enough if you want to go and get your millions in Saudi Arabia in some respects. But for Barcelona, I think they should aim younger and, more talented with their feet.
Okay. I think that's fair enough. I'd completely agree. Another one for Barcelona. We've seen supposedly Marcus Rashford is willing to kind of cut his wages to go over to Barca. United obviously are going to be trying to sell him. Whether he ends up staying in the Premier League, obviously he's been okay at Villa, I think, in the end. But Barca, there's always this links to Barca that whether that's just his agent trying to do it, whatever it might be. But we'll talk about him more in this sense of Barcelona than anywhere else. Marcus Rashford to Spain, to Barcelona. How do you feel about that? Because I think this is... The Rashford situation is something that is still so... It's every year it's always brought up. It's been brought up for years now. Obviously, United need this money, so they're going to be trying to get as much as they can for him. Barca need to be careful, obviously. They're still, obviously, because they've had a fantastic year, they are still in areas a bit shaky financially. But with a front three already of Lewandowski, who I guess isn't getting any younger, but still managed to have an okay season. Rafinha, who's been electric, Ballon d'Or contender. Lamine Yamal, another Ballon d'Or contender. To spend what United would probably be looking to get, 40, which is 40, for someone who might be a bench option all the time, sounds a bit ludicrous.
Yeah, it does. Totally does. I think the chat last year was that Nico Williams was going to go to Barcelona. Yeah. He's got very high wages as well because Athletic Club can afford to do that because they rarely spend money on transfer fees, so they can spend a lot on wages. Marcus Rashford... Look, I think he has a reasonable impact to Barcelona. I don't think he's a starter. And given how tight they need to be with their finances, and given the fact that they can quite easily change formation, and someone like Fermin Lopez plays a bit wider, or Gavi's even being used out wide as well. Ansu Fati's still at the club. I mean, kind of a forgotten man, but you don't really need him at Barcelona. But from Man United's perspective, if they're willing to take his full wages off the books, I'm worried that from their perspective, they might only be able to loan out Rashford next year. You absolutely sell Marcus Rashford, given the situation they're in now. It feels like he wants to leave. He didn't have the right... he didn't seem to be happy with his role at Man United. They clearly need the cash, get the wages off the books. He doesn't necessarily fit Amorim's system if you're going to stick with Amorim. the thing is that Man United are going to have to make so many decisions this summer that could well impact the next manager. And if Amorim starts next season as badly as this season has gone, it's very possible that he's again fired in November, December, or walks away. And then you are left with bringing in a new manager who might want Garnacho, who might want Rashford for his system, because they are very useful counter-attacking players. So you're kind of rolling the dice with how well Amorim is going to pick up, but you can't bring in the players to improve Amorim's current squad without selling Rashford and without selling potentially Garnacho as well. So there's just a huge headache for Man United to decide on this year. But from Barcelona's perspective, I don't think he's a good use of their very limited money.
Completely agree. Yeah, he's a conundrum. I don't quite understand what will exactly happen with him this year. Like, I don't think Villa will spend the 40 million on him.
So.
I kind of agree the same thing, that I think he'll end up going on loan somewhere first, and by that point, the season after, I don't know how many years he's got left on his contract. Maybe he's available for cheaper. But yeah, the Marcus Rashford situation,
it's going to rumble.
It will. I can genuinely see it lasting a long time at United, along with a few other things happening in the summer for them. One of the other situations that I think are really interesting to talk about is the Nuno Espirito Santo. Obviously, we're talking about transfers and players that come in. However, what could be a really bad decision is Nuno leaving Nottingham Forest, whether it's being sacked or him walking. Only a couple of weeks ago, we saw the very interesting pictures of the Nottingham Forest owner coming onto the pitch and having what looked like was a very intense conversation with Nuno Espirito Santo. Then we saw the release of a press release from the Forest
written
account.
by Evangelos Marinakis.
Basically saying, no, it wasn't that. We're actually really just happy about being back in Europe next year, and so on and so forth. To then see, obviously, these rumours coming out that possibly he might leave at the end of the season. We don't need to go into all the details about how great a job Nuno's done this season. I think we've spoken about it many times, and obviously he's been put forward as manager of the season, done such a good job. Even if they don't finish in the Champions League place, done such an incredible job for someone that was being predicted to be relegated this season. And for him to have been sacked, one of the first managers to be sacked. So he's done a great job on that front. But where does this Forest side go if this does happen, if this decision is taken? Is it just a super drop-off? Because obviously the system that they are playing now, all the players that they've got right now, really fit Nuno. It works so well for what he wants to do. Could somebody else come in and adapt the system, change the system, or would that be a bit of a mess?
Well, they potentially have to do it without Morgan Gibbs-White as well, who is continuing to be linked to Man City. Is a move that I slightly find a little bit baffling, if I'm totally honest. I don't really see him as a particularly natural Kevin De Bruyne replacement, if I'm totally honest. And look, they're looking at trying to get Florian Wirtz as well, but that deal's so expensive. So maybe it's Morgan Gibbs-White and another to kind of refresh their midfield and forward line. Let's see what happens there. But in terms of where Forest go from there, I think they've got a very, as you say, good 14 or 15 players that fit Nuno's system really, really well. But they need to strengthen quite considerably no matter what European competition they're in next year. And if they need to eventually replace Chris Wood, because he's not getting any younger, and he does need some help next year, and Mateus Cunha was a player that they were looking at. He looks like he's going to go to Man United. Suddenly you're looking at replacing Morgan Gibbs-White, thinking about the long-term Chris Wood replacement, and strengthening the kind of backups throughout the entire squad. It's suddenly a big ask for a new manager when you are playing in these expanded European competitions. And we've seen the effect that playing deep in Europe has had on Spurs and Man United in the league this year. And look, a lot of the blame has to go on to the system and the managers and the players not really delivering as well. But clearly, Europe takes a lot out of you. I mean, Chelsea had the benefit of playing their kind of B team in the Conference League group stage and had 2 fewer games and have still struggled with kind of tiredness in the back end of this season as well. So I can understand if Nuno is upset by what happened on the pitch the other day. If I had a gut feeling, I would be surprised if he left, because I feel like it's such an amazing opportunity to be in Europe with Forest. But I think a lot of managers would be excited by the opportunity to manage Forest, who are going to have a reasonably big transfer kitty as well. It's a kind of club that have kind of taken everyone by surprise this year. And even with Europe next year and the struggles around a few additions potentially, I can't really see them fighting relegation. Like, they'll probably finish in the top 12, 10. So yeah, it's not a disaster if they lose Nuno, I don't think, because they can bring in managers that kind of play in a similar style. But there's definitely work to be done there.
No, I think that's very, very true. And obviously, look, Morgan's White is just one of probably a few players that might get ended up linked to. We've seen Murillo before. I know he signed a new contract, but he's before been very spoken of, highly rated by a number of clubs, that possible transfers that could go towards him. And again, a lot of these guys, if they don't get Champions League football this year, there's a Champions League football club coming in for them in the summer, that will get them thinking, because is there a reality situation again where Forest can battle for a Champions League place in the Premier League? We'll see what happens next season, but look, top five might not be guaranteed to have fifth place might not be guaranteed to have a Champions League spot next year, so it could only be 4. And for some of these guys, I do wonder whether they think, maybe we could have a move here. Like, I think a few of them, Ola Aina, obviously his contract ends at the end of this season for Forest.
They are working quite hard to extend that, though.
For sure, but Man City could easily go, hello, we'd like to bring you in.
I actually thought Liverpool could move for him, to be honest, before Frimpong as well.
I think they're all fantastic. And I wouldn't be surprised by any of their options. Like, he's been so good this season. Obviously, he's a little bit older, but even just for a backup player, like, such an incredible guy to have on your books for you. It will be very, very interesting to see what happens with that Forest side. I can't quite work it out. Like, part of me, I think part of me would also kind of understand if Nuno did leave, just for the fact of, like, it must be stressful dealing with that ownership.
Not the easiest
and that board.
Guy to manage underneath.
Yeah, that's for sure. Okay, over to one of the players that I want to speak about, who currently plays for Lyon, but confirmed he will be leaving this summer. He's been spoken about for years, I think, as this wonder kid, somebody who, and especially when you watch him play, that United game, I know they lost it in the end, but he was fantastic. Some of the range of finishes he has, the ability on the ball, winning his first dribbler of the league, given to him by Eden Hazard this weekend. Of course, Ryan Cherky is a very, very interesting player. Numerous times he's been linked away. I think there was a move to Dortmund that looked like it nearly happened, and then by the look of the texts from Textor, he didn't let that move happen. Has been rumoured to Chelsea, to United, to basically any club in the world at times. Has worlds of talent. There's been questions supposedly about the entourage or attitude or whatever, but he is going to be leaving this summer. Hasn't revealed where it's going to be. Where do you think the best place would be for him? Because I think at the moment it looks like United and Liverpool are possible targets for him. Where do you think he should be going, though?
I think Liverpool's an interesting option for sure. I mean, it feels like Arne Slot doesn't really trust Harvey Elliott that much. I think the first league game that he started was against you guys a few weeks ago. So they clearly need to think about the Mo Salah long-term replacement, and maybe that's Jeremy Frimpong, maybe not. But Szoboszlai, I think, could be rotated a little bit more as well. Like, he clearly gives so much in terms of his energy and work rate, etc. But I wonder whether he's still somewhat, and he's a relatively young man as well, still somewhat adapting to the intensity of the Premier League at points. So I think the fact that everyone says that Liverpool got really lucky with injuries this year, and I don't necessarily disagree, but I think it's overdone because they did have injuries in certain areas, but they certainly got lucky with their injuries in midfield. Like Gravenberch, McAllister and Szoboszlai and Jones played virtually, they were fit for the entire season pretty much. So having Ryan Cherky in there to rotate with the Szoboszlai would be really fun. And Cherky is a magnificent player to watch. It really did click this year. I think in terms of expected assists per 90, I looked the other day, so it might not be accurate as of right now, but it was up until a couple of weeks ago, top in Europe. So in terms of creativity, in terms of fun, in terms of flair, in terms of energy, he is the reason why you watch football players like that. He is so entertaining. You know, I've said it many, many times, but it feels like the most natural sort of modern day Eden Hazard in terms of the comfort he's got in dribbling, in tight spaces, etc. Maybe not as explosive as Eden Hazard, but so comfortable on the ball. And I think he'd be a brilliant player. I mean, it was interesting.
Also, no defensive work.
Yeah. It was interesting that more like a year ago, I think it was, he was very close to joining Fulham, supposedly, in January. Yes. Dortmund and Bayern Munich were looking at him. Like, it feels like after this season when it really clicked with him, you know, the caliber of club he was linked to was just so much higher. So I'd be very surprised if he wasn't going to a Champions League club, which kind of rules out a Man United, for example, who I think he would have been a very good fit for. But if you're bringing in Mateus Cunha, you don't need Cherky as well.
Yes. I think that's a very fair way to put it. And also, one of the really interesting things with him is, I think interesting the fact that it's been spoken about so much for his kind of attitude side. And if you're already having issues, I think, with the squad generally, adding somebody like this who probably needs a very a Liverpool dressing room, maybe what a United dressing room is right now. Obviously, very, very different. One's just won the Premier League, one's just finished above the relegation zone. However, like to allow him to kind of not have any of these issues from the off, I think if he's joining a dressing room which is already negative, already downbeat, already kind of like going through the worst times, you might end up seeing this part of it. Obviously, we can only know so much, but I think he's somebody who would would be very fun to watch in the Premier League, as you've already stated. I just don't know whether is he ready for a top 4 team now. That's the thing. Or should he be waiting for more of a developing team? Should he go to a team? I guess Dortmund could be a Champions League side.
I think,
that more of a
Dortmund's
better route than a Premier League winner?
I think Dortmund's a really nice fit, to be totally honest. I mean, they've changed to a back 5 system under Niko Kovac. He's secured Champions League football, which didn't look like it was going to happen when they were sort of stranded in mid-table when he was appointed. And Julian Brandt, there's a little bit of speculation about he might leave and go back to Werder Bremen, which I think was his first ever club. They have lacked a little bit of spark, I think, this year, Dortmund, since Royce's departure. They've lost so many big players in the last few years without really replacing them to the same standard. And Adeyemi's actually really thrived since Niko Kovac has arrived. But you can see a front three of Guirassy, Adeyemi and Cherki kind of finding their options and finding their runs being pretty fun to watch for sure. So I prefer Dortmund to move to the Premier League because, as I say, it's quite difficult to imagine him going into a Liverpool right now and being a guaranteed starter right now. And I want to see him play. I want to see the fun that he can bring. And I feel like Dortmund need that spark more than any other. Yeah.
He's versatile as well, which is one of the nice things. He kind of fit into different systems or different positions, whether it's 10 or on the wing. Yeah, he's going to be super, super fun to watch wherever he goes. I think that's for sure. But one of the teams we also need to speak about is Man City. Very interestingly, after beating Bournemouth, Pep Guardiola was saying all about how I will leave if you give me a big squad. I will leave if you give me a big squad. I don't know very much if Pep was being his classic Pep Guardiola self and kind of just saying some weird stuff at times after games, as he does when he's won a game. But yeah, he was talking about how he doesn't want to have a big squad because he feels too bad for the players that he has to put on the bench. He said he'd rather have a small squad and use some of the academy players for next season, which is weird because I don't feel like he had a big squad this season either. But maybe he feels like he does because basically people were complaining about, Jack Grealish doesn't play and so on and so forth. And so, look, they've been linked to a few different players so far already this January. We've seen Florian Wirtz linked to them. Sorry, this summer, we've seen obviously Florian Wirtz linked to them. Suppose they're pulling out of that because it's too expensive with all of his wages as well. But one of the really interesting ones was Reinders from AC Milan being linked to Man City. We've mentioned Gibbs White as well as a possible recruitment process for their midfield. They're obviously looking to strengthen that midfield area. Where do we feel like Reinders would be? Because he wouldn't be the first name I would have thought that Pep would have looked at. However, it is still a really interesting kind of move for him. And I also think City probably do need to start thinking about post-Pep and players who, whilst okay, they could maybe fit into the system now, what manager could come in after and what system could they play after. And obviously with the way it feels like Premier League football is going, very physical as well with the way it's developing, so it makes maybe sense as to why they're looking at some of these guys. How do you think Reinders would adapt to the Premier League?
Well, I think there'll be big changes at Man City this year. I mean, clearly losing the FA Cup final, going down to the wire in terms of even qualifying for the Champions League. It's been a disaster by their impeccable standards over the last few years. De Bruyne's obviously leaving. I actually thought I don't want to hammer the Etihad atmosphere, but it was quite quiet when he went off the other day, which I thought was really weird. Rodri coming on for his comeback got a bigger cheer than De Bruyne, which I thought was bizarre, but maybe that was just, how it came across on TV. But Gundogan, I think, will leave. Bernardo Silva has probably played his final few games as well. Obviously, Grealish on the wing feels almost certain to leave as well. Tijani Reinders has been phenomenal for Milan this year and has arguably been Serie A's best midfielder. Great box-to-box midfielder, really technical in the final third. I actually really like it as a fit. I actually prefer it to Morgan Gibbs-White, and then I would bring in a more natural creator than Gibbs-White. I feel like Gibbs-White thrives in transition, which is just not what I imagine even Pep next year, even if he evolves this team, is going to be looking at. Look, I don't mean to be harsh on Gibbs-White. I think he's an amazing player and he's had a great season and he fully deserves all the plaudits coming his way. But going from a side that averaged less than 40% possession to one that averaged over 65%, I think is just a big, big change. Whereas Tijani Reinders has played in a possession-based style with the national team, with the Dutch national team. Milan have been dreadful this year, really, really up and down. But him alongside Pulisic has probably been their best player. And he's, can score goals, can create, can make late runs into the box. And it also adds a certain physical capability to this side. And if you have a midfield which includes Rodri, who's coming back from injury, Nico Gonzalez, Tijani Reinders, it's just so much more physical than the Gundogan, Kovacic, Bernardo Silva combination that we've been seeing at points this year. Like, I like Kovacic, and he clearly doesn't really rate Mateus Nunes in midfield either, because he's the right back. He's only getting options. He's only getting game time at right back, of course. But Kovacic, like, the last thing you want Kovacic to do when you sign for Man City is for him to cover 60 metres by himself. Like, he's just, for all his strengths in terms of his dribbling through tight spaces, etc., he's just not a physical specimen. He's very slow.
No, for sure.
Very, very slow.
And he's getting older now. He's into his 30s.
And he's into his 30s as well. And I don't think they would have ever designed for him to start, 25 plus league games when he signed. It was clearly like a bit of a make way before they bring in new players. But Rodri, Nico Gonzalez, and Tijani Reinders as covering 2 of those 3 midfield slots, and then maybe someone more creative that they bring in. Suddenly you're thinking, this Man City side could be very, very effective next year. And I do think, it was a weird season. I do think Rodri makes such a difference to this side, and I would be very, very surprised if they weren't considerably better and back to over 80 points next year.
Is that creative player not Phil Foden, anyway?
It could be Phil Foden. It's very difficult to say. I mean, he came out this morning, I think it was this morning or maybe even yesterday, talking about off-the-field issues, this ankle issues that he struggled to get over. I wouldn't give up on Phil Foden whatsoever, especially with the amount of experience that is leaving City this year. Phil Foden, for a guy his age, has achieved amazing things at Man City, and you'd be a fool to write that off on the back of one bad season. But it has been really, really poor. It has been really poor. Like, there hasn't been a drop-off from a PFA Player of the Year like this since that weird Eden Hazard season.
Yes.
But Eden Hazard's still clearly a top player, responded very well, and I back Phil Foden to do the same, but he really needs to up it next year.
It's funny as well, because I always remember when Grealish first came through at Villa, or when he really started coming through at Villa in the Premier League after the relegation back up. It always felt like, his kind of future could become this like 10 role and being this 10 role, and obviously that's never ever really happened, or being the central midfielder, and it's never really happened. He alone could be very interesting to see where he goes as well in the summer. If he does go as well, that could be the other side of it too. Plus, they do have to probably fit Marmouche next season as well.
Yeah, that's true.
He's obviously been incredible. He's been probably one of their best
goals
players
the other night.
Yeah, absolutely outrageous goal against Bournemouth, and maybe that's a position for him to kind of operate in as well.
We still haven't really seen Haaland and Marmouche naturally click as a duo as well.
No, we haven't.
And Haaland's obviously a lot of that's injury related as well, but that is central to their success next year. Yeah. And then you really want to see better output from Doku. You really want to see improved output from Savio, who's had, I think, an impact in certain games and has looked bright, but you need, you're replacing, City have had a plethora of amazing players, whether that's David Silva, Sane, Sterling, Kevin De Bruyne, obviously, over the last few years. And it's very difficult to step into their shoes and continue the success. But Savio and Doku just need to raise it next year.
Okay. Now, one of the final 2 moves we're going to speak about, I kind of purposely put this one in here because Ollie Thomas was going to be on the show. I thought, we might talk about a little bit of Palace. And one of the moves that I thought were very interesting. Obviously, we've seen Jamie Vardy ending his career at Leicester City, but saying he wants to stay in the Premier League. Obviously, getting on, but still managed to find the back of the net a few times. And he has been linked to Crystal Palace.
Has he? I haven't actually seen that.
Obviously, he is very much coming towards the end of his career. Has that clinical ability, I think, in front of goals still. Like, he's shown that even in the game against, who is it on the weekend they beat? Was it Ipswich? Finished the ball lovely to have that, 200th goal for them. What do you think of that move? I mean, if they were to bring him in as a third choice striker, he sits on the bench, is that okay?
It raises the publicity around the club if they need any more.
Yeah, sure.
I don't love it. I really don't love it. I don't know where he goes next. I can actually see him going to the MLS for a couple of years or something like that. Or
he himself has said he wants to play in the Prem.
I wouldn't rush to sign him after his season at Leicester, if I'm totally honest. And I feel like Crystal Palace need to be more ambitious than that. Yeah. They are going to play a lot of games next year, guaranteed 8 in the Europa League. They need Nketiah to step up next year. And Jamie Vardy as a third choice striker at his age, I just wouldn't back him to make much impact in the Premier League or in the Europa League right now. I sorry to say, because he's been an amazing player. He's a Premier League icon, if not a legend, an amazing servant to Leicester City. But I just think Palace can do better.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. It'd be a very weird move. I could see it. You know what I can see it happening is one of the new boys that come up, like does a Sheffield United if they or Sunderland.
Wow.
Didn't let me finish my sentence there. No, I actually think Sunderland wouldn't go for him. To be honest,
We
I think Sheffield
signed
United,
sort of 16-year-olds.
Yeah, I thought like Sheffield United or a no, Burnley wouldn't either.
Burnley
really.
wouldn't either. No, I don't think
Neither
Leeds would.
No, so maybe it's only United. So maybe you've got to beat them just so Vardy can't get back in the Premier League. So yeah, I mean maybe that will happen. We'll see. I mean I do kind of think he should be looking more towards like MLS or something like that if he wants to prolong his career. But it's whether him and Rebecca Vardy want to go out to America, which
It's true.
I feel like she might want to.
She might want to.
One of the final moves then we need to talk about is João Pedro. Obviously, João Pedro missed the game for Brighton this weekend for a bust-up with apparently Van Heck in training. Supposedly that's been cleared now, is that he might feature in the last game of the season for Brighton. Absolutely ruined me in draft because I need at least 1 point from him to win the draft league. Doing well this season, lads. Goes down to the final game. But yeah,
John Babb.
Against John Babb, indeed. Yeah, John Babb somehow always up there in draft. Yes, but João Pedro, 60 million euros is supposedly the fee or 6 million pounds is supposedly the fee to get his services. It's funny because I feel like with all the striker talk, his name's not really ever thrown into the mix. It's always about Gyökeres, Osimhen's always spoken about, Djellab, Sesko, even Hugo Ekitike, obviously playing over in Germany. But João Pedro's name never really comes up. And I mean, to a degree, he isn't necessarily an out-and-out striker, is he? The way he plays, the amount of touches he has on the ball, the way he wants to operate, isn't how maybe these other names want to be. They are more number nines. João Pedro is not that. But for £60 million, I know we're talking about teams about maybe worse transfers, and so they obviously we can kind of talk about that. But where do you think maybe is the ideal place before we talk about where he shouldn't be going?
I see your point that he hasn't been talked about enough, but I think he's actually in a really good position at Brighton. I think it's an upwardly mobile club. I wouldn't.
You think he should stay?
Well, let's see what money gets offered. Look, I think João Pedro is really underrated. I can see him playing for a Champions League club before too long. I thought he touched the Europa League really effectively under De Zerbi last year as well. I think he was the top scorer in that competition, at least for most of it. I might be wrong on that by the end of it. But yeah, he's obviously a quality player, plays very good through balls, very comfortable on the ball, can manipulate the ball in tight spaces really effectively, can score goals, very accomplished penalty taker as well. In terms of where's a natural fit for him, I wonder whether a club like Newcastle might have a look at him. Like they clearly need a backup to Alexander Isak.
Plays off the left as well. He can
play off the left. He could also, in games that I've talked about it for years, but I do think Newcastle could do with a more attacking-minded midfielder at points as well. Yeah. Look, they tend to stick to a 4-3-3, although Eddie Howe has been mixing that up with a little bit more of a 5 at the back in recent years. You also look at where Aston Villa might be looking in the summer as well. If Ollie Watkins leaves the club, they clearly need to potentially bring in a number of forwards if Asensio and Rashford don't stay. João Pedro at Villa, I think, feels like a really nice addition there as well. Maybe doesn't have the express pace of a player that they play in, because they play obviously so they bait the press and then play long into these counter-attacking forwards.
He's
and
not
maybe
definitely
not slow, but it doesn't feel like a sort of natural Rashford replacement, if that makes sense. But maybe it would be a kind of evolution of Emery's tactics as well. So that's the kind of club I could see going for him. I feel like Arsenal, a club like that, are going to go for an elite 9. Okay. If I'm totally honest, like a real point man forward, because they've already got Havertz that can play deeper, thread the play very effectively, hold the ball up. So I don't think they need a João Pedro so much.
What about Liverpool? If he played number 9 for Liverpool, do you think that could work? Or is that more of a move where you think he's not quite ready for that yet?
I think it could work. I've got my doubts about all these strikers being linked to, because we've just had our fingers burnt so many times in the Premier League about.
Yeah, true.
Less so about Gyökeres, but Benjamin Šeško does slightly concern me, because I do think his finishing is quite up and down, even though his numbers are going up and up year on year. I still feel like he misses so many clear-cut opportunities, and it's a big ask to come into a Premier League club and be an instant starter. João Pedro feels like, with a couple of years of Premier League experience, he's also got experience in the Championship, he's very versatile. But slots number 9s in the past, whether it was Myron Boadu at AZ Alkmaar and then Santiago Jimenez, have actually been over 6 foot, big physical lads. So that's why I thought Darwin Núñez would be more used. But it feels like he's just become so frustrated with his wastefulness. So I We don't really know what a slot number 9 is for Liverpool just yet, and we'll find out this summer, obviously. But I would be surprised if it was João Pedro.
Okay, well, it'll be very interesting where João Pedro ends up. I still can't quite call it. I feel like, again, it's going to be this domino effect of who gets what, and then someone goes, God, we need a striker. 60 million for João Pedro, please.
Chelsea like buying from Brighton.
Yeah, I suppose they are interested. I would be shocked if it was Chelsea.
You'd go for a more 9.
Yeah, unless a team was to think, you know what, João Pedro isn't a 9. We actually want him as a left winger. Maybe that's a slightly different way to bring him into your side, quite possibly. But I think Chelsea want at least a striker, want more of a 9. But we'll see, as we mentioned a few times, what happens with that this summer. But then we have a Dougie. That is the end of the video. I hope you guys at home have enjoyed this one. Obviously talking about the transfer rumours and this 2-man special. Little FD loving
Enjoyed
here.
it.
Obviously, there's a lot more talking when it's just 2 people, for sure.
Enjoyed
So we could have done with maybe a bit of water here as well. But Dougie, thank you so much for jumping on. If people at home want to check you out on some more content, where can they find you?
Dougie Critchley across all socials, and please pray for Sunderland. Because we have a big, life-defining, potentially, game tomorrow. I don't think it'll define my life, because hopefully we'll be back in the Premier League before too long, but might define the early part of my 30s. So please pray for Sunderland.
Yeah, fair. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for watching. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you guys next week.